Hey, there is my friend Chris. I want to welcome everybody, the entire audience that we have for the big picture. We've been having some really good conversations around finance, around technology, and how it affects certain regions like St. Croix, Virgin Islands, what we can do, and where all this is going. And so today, we're going to be talking about from Nairobi to Nassau. We're talking about the rise of cryptocurrency on the African continent, which I think has been a game changer. And to be very honest, it's been going on for a while, but I don't think we in the West are really taking, have it, we're not at the level of adoption that they are, where we're just dabbling. Now, of course, we got stablecoin. We've had some things going on in the legislation, but in fact, in some of these African countries, they have been doing this for years now. So let me get Chris introduced. Let's tee up this show. So, Chris, welcome to the big picture.
Whoa, Grant, that was a lead-in that I loved. And I got to tell you, when you talk about that, we in the West, really, in my view, it's the whole northern hemisphere versus the southern hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's to me is really where the difference is. It's not just like the West, because what is the East then, right? But if you look at the southern hemisphere, which is all of South America, Latin America, Africa, and then Southeast Asia, along with Australia, and then you look at the northern hemisphere, the U.S., Canada, Mexico, Europe, all of it, including the UK, Russia, China, Japan, Korea. We're talking about the developed world pretty much.
True.
Versus the less developed world.
Yeah.
At least that's the image, right?
And you said, man, we had a conversation. I'll give the audience a little preview. Me and Chris had this conversation about maps and how they draw the map. A lot of times, I don't think people really realize how big the African continent really is. And there's about 50 countries on the African continent. Just to give you some perspective, I think in the Western Hemisphere, I think when you count them all up, maybe there's 20. But most of those are probably in South America, because North America is really 2 countries. Central America is maybe,
Three.
Is it 3? All right.
North America, Mexico, Canada, and the U.S.
I always count Mexico as part of the Central America, so I might be off.
Yeah, a lot of people do, but it's really considered part of North America. I mean, look at the NAFTA agreement, right?
Yeah. No. So you make a great point. But what we're really talking about is size and scope, and what is really taking place right now. I mean, not even right now. It has been taking place for a long time. And I think, Africa has been seen as the lab for fintech, as a fintech guy like yourself, Mr. Financial IT. My question is why do you think crypto adoption has taken off so much more faster than some of these Western nations?
Well, Grant, there's a number of things that come into play here. And some of the initial things are there isn't a lot of legacy payment systems, financial systems, banking systems in Africa. So they're not tied and held back with old technology. So much easier for them to make the leap from really, in a lot of cases, manual bookkeeping, even on the banking levels, to the latest and greatest.
Yeah.
Right. So they can jump right into it. That's one reason why they're able to do it. the other reason is that when you talk about the countries there, we don't look at any of those countries as having a what's considered major currency, right? South Africa would be the closest out of any with the rand, right? That would be the closest to saying that there's a major currency in Africa. So as a result of that, crypto becomes a preference. It becomes faster and easier. It becomes more accessible because you can do that right on your phone, right? You don't need to go to a physical bank. You don't need to have anything that ties you to older technology. You can do everything very simply and easily. And then when you talk about every country and the different currencies, the currencies are not strong, right? So the currencies fluctuate, and getting hard currency, which is a problem that we've discussed a number of times for the Caribbean, right?
Yep.
Getting US dollars, getting British pounds, getting euros, are not easy down there through the banking system. So all of these things, plus there's a few others, come together and just make a really beautiful crypto situation.
I'd say so. And the fact that you have infrastructure, meaning mobile technology. They've adopted mobile technology for a long time. A lot of people are used to having mobile, and that you've got an infrastructure built that, so you're not going underneath the ground so much, but you have a lot of called air cover, you would say. So the mobile world is pretty strong. And because you have that mobile flexibility, and then you can layer an application like cryptocurrency on top of that, now you've got a way to get buy, sell, trade, to take place at scale that you never could, or you're not doing so much in the US because, like you said, we have legacy systems. So you don't have to use cryptocurrency. There's the necessity. We talked about this a little earlier. The necessity is the mother of innovation, right?
One of my favorite lines.
Go ahead.
One of my favorite lines.
Yeah, it's a classic. But there's a great necessity on the African continent of how you get, first of all, stable infrastructure when it comes to the transference of finance and capital. And this is what is going to, I think, will propel a whole new renaissance on the continent. Now, if you can explain how stable coins have helped every day, these are everyday Africans fight inflation, because you mentioned the instability in some of their own country currencies. But if you have stable coins, why does that matter so much, not only for African, but it also could be for the Caribbean economies as well?
Well, Greg, let's start with a couple of things. And I want to go back to that same line that you had, necessity is the mother of invention, or in this case, innovation, right? So the need is there, and how do they solve it? And the simplest solution, because the infrastructure and the legacy systems aren't there, was, as you said, going mobile, right? So they went mobile. And this goes back to a lot of conversations we've had, because one of our favorite topics of both of us is the unbanked.
Yes.
Okay. And there's a huge percentage in Africa of people that would be considered unbanked, right? And I've always said is the unbanked do mental thing to them. People that have a small income, and then a portion that has to go to the banks for whatever the banks want to charge, or worse yet, the credit cards like MasterCard or Visa, right? It's unfair. It really what it is. They're taking money where they shouldn't be putting their hands. That's my personal opinion, right? Now, so you take all that and you look at the unbanked, and you look at what do they really need? It's so simple, right? They need a way to pay and a way to get paid, right? There's not a lot of savings going on. There's not a lot of need for insurance, for money markets, for stocks, for all these kind of things that they flood us with in, let's say, the West, right? Or in the Northern Hemisphere, which is how I'd rather talk about it today. So there's not that need for them. They're not taking car loans. They're not getting mortgages, right? So there's a lot of these things that we kind of depend on the legacy banking structure for that, are not useful to most of these people. So why be banked? In fact, I would rather even discuss, maybe another show, on how we unbank the banked.
That'd be a heck of a show. The bank still want to hear that. How you unbank the bank? What are you talking about,
Yeah,
Chris?
yeah,
What's he talking about?
it's a very popular topic in very small circles. Anyway,
right. But this is so
so
that's
when we get
the
to
new
we
world
get
that's
to
taking shape, right?
yeah, when we get to the stable coin part, which is where your
Yeah,
question was, and I know I
right.
I did a little.
No, you got to take us down that road, but this is good.
Okay,
This is good.
what the stable coins does is when you take your local currency and you're able to buy a stable coin backed by a fiat, and in the majority of the stable coins stay the majority of the money. And now, we talked a couple of weeks ago on the market cap was about 250 billion. I mean, 200 million. Start again. $200 billion in stable coins. We're now up over $250 billion in stable coins. It's only been a couple of weeks. This will continue to grow and it'll actually accelerate. Okay. So what we see here is that when you purchase a stable coin, first, it's a crypto that doesn't fluctuate, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't go up, it doesn't go down. It's not the kind of crypto that the people who want to buy crypto and think it's going to go up in value and they're going to buy the Lamborghini, right? Where's my Lambo, right? Stable coins are not that kind of an instrument. Stable coins are just what they say, stable. They stay at that same value when you purchase them for a week from now, 2 weeks from now, a month, they stay at that same value. And they're tied to a major fiat. And like I said, most cases, I think it's something like 85% of all stable coins are backed by the US dollar. Mm-hmm. So once you've done that now and you've purchased it, now you have, in effect, US dollars that are tradable instantly. Mm-hmm. And you can go and buy your goods from any other country that you want or pay for anything that you want based on that stable coin, which is a big benefit to a continent like Africa, where you don't have a major currency local and where you don't have currencies that are stable. They fluctuate, based on all kinds of things. Sometimes it's something that happens in the weather, right? Sometimes it's political. In fact, maybe more times it's political, right? But in any case, you have that instability. So the stable coin on top of the mobile with the crypto layer, it's the coming together of a real harmony of sweet sounding music.
No, this is where, and as we look to build out the financial hub in St. Croix through SETI case, we want to take a page out of their book. Like this, these are major countries doing this, not like a company like I said, just a bank. Countries like in Kenya and Uganda and others are like, what? This is how we're going to get things done. I think even in the West, you had some Central American companies or countries. They're like, no, this is how we're going to get things done because it's going to make life easier. But when you have that stable coin on top of that, now you're like, what? A dollar is a dollar. This is what I like about it. A dollar is a dollar no matter where you are in the world. Like right now, a real physical dollar, and you go into Europe and you trade it for a pound, where's going to be variation, right? There's going to be variation in what what the real value is. But a stable coin is a dollar everywhere. So now all people can agree on value. And if you have that we have, and this is where I always go back to that. I said it even the last show, I'm gonna say it again. This is why you can go to almost any ATM in the world and stick in your ATM card and get money back out, because there's an agreed upon set of protocols that every banking system in the world says, yes, this is how we're going to do business. A stable coin, I believe, is that instrument. So a dollar becomes a dollar. Now you have consistency. Now you have something that is agreed upon that can be used at a high level, and trust. We talked about that last week. Trust. You've got to have trust. So if we can create a pan-Caribbean crypto infrastructure similar to how mobile money is unified African markets, do you see now St. Croix playing in that world, not only just in the Caribbean world, but also in what you call that southern hemisphere we call Africa?
Yeah, great. I mean, you just hit a bunch of really, really great points throughout everything there. That so if we just go back and look to touch on some of them, right? So yes, this now allows people in these other countries that are not really part of the financial system in terms of being able to have easy access to hard currency and these kind of things, allows them to play on an equal playing field, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can go ahead and do what they want. Now, we're talking about this today, keep in mind, okay, because of the changes and the new rules put in place in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Because if that didn't happen, and I'm talking about the Genius Act, the Surety Act, those things didn't happen
mm-hmm.
recently, stable coins would not be able to take they can take that role. They won't have the standing to be able to be used everywhere. But when the U.S. Financial system, government and the Fed and the SEC all agree that stable coins can do what they were designed to do, and that we're going to say and be part of that system, now everybody can play, because nobody's worried about, is what the regulation is. Am I going to get in trouble doing this or any of these kind of things? So that's a key thing, and that's has been critical to the fact that we can have this conversation. And it's also been one of the reasons why, if you watch crypto, that the blockchains that most of the stable coins are running on, and
mm-hmm.
primarily Ethereum, which about 65% are on. So Solana is another one that's very big on that. While their coins have gone up in value, we've seen Ethereum double since the beginning of the year, for example, right? So they tie together in that way. So now when we have this structure and we have these things in place, now you can actually go out into the world and be able to be part of the global trade community, which is, again, critically important for a lot of these places. And when you talk about the Caribbean for a second, and I don't want to get off the African trail.
No, because we've got, I tell you what, let's take a short break and bring that back, because we got a lot to unpack here. As you see, this is a game-changing conversation that we really need to unpack for the audience, so they can really, to assess their own situation and see how they can go forward. We'll be right back.
Third Wall Street is a new emerging global capital markets formation and structured trifactor financial hub at the U.S. Third Border in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, in the Caribbean and Latin America. The new Third Wall Street is the home of the Alexander Hamilton Financial Center and named in honor of Alexander Hamilton, an American founding father, first U.S. Treasury Secretary, and architect of the U.S. financial system and modern America. Third Wall Street is located in a U.S. National Heritage Area, Opportunity Zone, and the boyhood home of Alexander Hamilton in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Island, connecting 3 financial hubs in the Americas by way of new innovative financial technology and markets: New York Wall Street South, Brickell Avenue, Miami, and Third Wall Street in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, and established the new Caribbean Americas Single Economy Zone, developed by SETI Case Capital Markets. Third Wall Street will transform financial markets, improving access to capital worldwide. Visit www.thirdwallstreet.com to learn more.
Welcome back, everybody. We're having a stimulating conversation around how the cryptocurrencies are being used in the African continent, how we in St. Croix and Virgin Islands, Caribbean, can actually take a page out of their book and begin to utilize these same types of strategies in our own framework that we're doing. And because of new legislation that's come out of the U.S. around stable coins themselves, as Chris has alluded to, this is an opportunity for shift and change and escalation. So Chris, continue on and educate us on your viewpoints of how this can be applied.
Well, Graham, one of the things I want to talk about also, so we can lay some groundwork, right? Mm-hmm. Good foundation, good house, right? Is fintech in Africa, and you started this off with some view into that. So why fintech has become so important in Africa? Well, we talked a little bit about the fact that there's very little legacy technology, right? But the other things to look at, okay, in Africa, the general average population age is in the low 20s. Mm-hmm. They have the youngest population on the globe, right? They have a huge population. Nigeria is a top 10 country in population and growing, right? Kenya, Uganda, Angola, Ethiopia, all these economies are actually growing at a better pace than we see in the Northern Hemisphere, right? So these are important. So now you have young people, right, who are pretty much growing up with the phone. So they're what I would call digital natives. Not like you and me, Grant. We had to learn, we have to keep learning, and then we have to keep learning all this stuff, right? They get on there.
You're rotary dial natives. That's where we are, rotary.
Right. Yeah, one phone in the kitchen where everyone listens to what you talk about, right? So now think about this. Why fintech has been growing at a really an amazing rate in Africa. Yeah, yes, you have the young kids who are technology and digital natives, but think about this also. If you want to start a business, right, and you want to start a business, I don't know, making picture frames, right? Mm-hmm. You need a building, you need machinery, you need raw materials, you need to be able to transport this stuff, right? And you need the staff to go with all this, right? It's a big cost just to set up this business. It's a cost beyond what most people in Africa can do. But give them a $150 computer and they can go ahead and code and build some amazing fintech technology.
Absolutely. You know, what you're talking about, Chris, is the huge game changer where you used to have these big buildings, these big budgets. You got your IBMs in there, your Cisco infrastructures. You got all the big names, big dollars. But now you yourself, just with a phone and access to the internet, you can build applications. You can conduct finance at scale. You can utilize your technological platforms for media and content creation that you never could before. And as to your point, if you're savvy, if you're digitally savvy, you can create content, you can create financial opportunity for yourself. You can buy, sell, and trade while you're sitting there in Nairobi, just like if you were in New York City, and the economy of scale. Because remember, even though a dollar is a dollar only goes so much far in New York City. How far does it go when you're in a place like Nairobi or some other locations, Uganda? So it goes a long way, right?
Yeah. So to me, this is the hidden excitement. This is really what's making this engine grow. And people don't talk about it enough, and maybe they don't realize it. But this low entry cost to get into business, to build a business that can grow. This is just something that I don't think any people, really think about. And one of the reasons why I bring it up, because, I've been there, I've witnessed it, I've seen these, young people, build banking level applications with just a couple of computers and a bunch of friends sitting together, right? The same thing, right? So now you look at one of the great natural resources in the continent of Africa is this young population.
Yeah.
Now we look at the Caribbean, and we've talked about. I'm a big believer that one of the most important natural resources in the Caribbean are the people.
Yes.
Right. Hardworking, dedicated, eager to learn. Right. Not afraid to put the time in. And you have also that young population that are digital natives. So we should be looking at how we can make things easier, improve things, across the board for young people. Because again, the entry level to create a business is really a phone, a computer, and the internet.
And knowledge. You've got to have knowledge. You've got to have the right information. You have access through artificial intelligence and AI. You can get Harvard level information and applied knowledge at a fingertip. This is our world is rapidly changing. However, you still have to utilize critical thinking. We've got to start utilizing and understanding, have the information, but how do you apply it? How do you apply it in a world that's going to take me up from a scarcity level, let's say, to a prosperous level by getting the flow? Because what we're really talking about is a banking guy. You understand deal flow, right? And when you watch money flow on a worldwide scale, and traditionally that money has not flowed to the Southern Hemisphere. When it got down to the African world or African continent, things like that, it wasn't the same flow as you see in Europe and North America, right? So we got to tap into that. So if you can tap into that flow, siphon off. So is that rivers flowing through, and now that water is now nurturing your world as well. And you already have a wealth of resources in the gigantic, and I'll say it again, gigantic continent of Africa, where you've got gold, you've got so many natural resources. It's unbelievable, but it's not tapped. So you're looking at it as a supplier world, when really it can be a producer world, producer of fintech at scale that is, it could radically change the landscape of how we view our world infrastructure, because now you're taking a player that's kind of not been in the game and placing them in the game. And then you start looking at, all right, because now they're in the game, and we don't want to sleep on this. You alluded to this even earlier around, hey, you need to get on board this whole stable coin and what's happening and the chains and the infrastructure and the rails of how commerce is happening. If you're not in the game, right, you're on the sideline. We do not want that to happen. We're going to take another quick break because I see it on Chris's face. He's like, I got to get back in there. Your conversation, you're taking it to the level that we need to, like, yeah, let's get off the bench. Let's get out there and let's score some touchdowns. So we'll be right back.
Follow the Brand TV broadcast host, Grant McGaw, as he visits with top executives and entrepreneurs to find out their secrets of success with their personal brand. Follow the Brand TV broadcast host as he focuses on brand development to build better relationships, bring value to your business, relationships, and career. You will enjoy listening to each episode that is tailored to speak to you directly. If you're looking for this type of clarity in terms of building your brand, you have tuned into the right station. Each episode will help you to shape a conversation in the 5-star BDM network of 20,000 professionals and become a springboard for your corporate engagement and business opportunities. Each guest will frame their story in the areas of personal branding, business development, career development, financial empowerment, and technology innovation. Grant McGaw explains why he is the CEO and owner of his own professional career. Grant is an accomplished business leader and entrepreneur who wants to give back to individuals to grow their personal brand strategy. Tune in as he weaves his story about new possibilities, while to you exceed expectations. If you love storytelling, this show will make for fun.
Here we are back, and I see it on your face, Chris. I'm going to take you off the bench. I'm going to put you in the game. I want to play you at quarterback, and I want you to call the plays. What do we need to do to get into this higher economy that's taking place?
Hey, coach, put me in the game. So there's a few things that I wanted to touch upon in this, and one is, while we see a lot of great tech and fintech specifically coming out of Africa, the issue really has been still, and you're a brand guy, you'll get this, it's still the perception, okay? Uh-huh. And the perception of Africa is the same perception in a lot of ways as 50 years ago. And while some of that, not all of it, might have been true 50 years ago, very little of it is true today. Mm-hmm. But that's where the issue is when I see some of these great young entrepreneurs and I see them at events in Europe, right? We did Money 2020 back in Amsterdam in June, and there was several African companies that I was very interested in talking to, and really sharp people who are doing this business, but they have this gap we don't have in the Northern Hemisphere, which is, but you're from Africa. How can I depend on it? How can I trust it? And then it's kind of funny is that because especially the Europeans have seen this good tech coming in Africa, they see an opportunity, so they're all trying to go down there. But when you start matching up the new sharp, right up to speed tech that's coming out of Africa with the legacy tech in most cases that Europe is going down there with, it's not really a match. And that actually increases the gap, because then the Europeans, because of course they want to make money down there before they spend money down there, right?
Yeah.
Are not successful. So they come back and rather than say, their tech is beating our tech, they say Africa's not ready for our tech. And that fits that same perception that's been for the last 50 years, right? So they really have these hurdles that are almost impossible in some cases to go with before they can actually play on the world stage. And, it's hard to see how that really will play out until we see still further development down there. And I also speak about this because in some ways the Caribbean has kind of the same issue. That there's some good tech. There's some real sharp people at different island nations who are doing great things. And, they come to the U.S. because that's the market where you can, the Caribbean's a limited market, right? That's the market that you can come and be successful. And, again, the typical image that's been there is beaches and palm trees.
That's it. That's the perception. Right? Yeah.
Which, by the way, is great. If you're in the tourism business, don't stop that. That's a brand you want to continue pounding into people's minds. It's a great one, right?
Right.
But when you come to the U.S. and offer your tech, right away people are thinking about, laying on the beach, and they're like, these guys serious? Can they really do this? So it's a hurdle. And how we can get past that, I mean, to me, the one way to do that is if one of these companies somewhere became a unicorn. Right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by unicorn is a company that starts from the very beginning and then jumps up to $1 billion status within a couple of short years and has a, let's say, Facebook-like impact on people's lives everywhere. No one will care where it comes from then, right?
Sure.
But it will rise up the whole standard. And now investors will be looking down there and saying, okay, well, there's one, we don't believe they travel alone. So can we find a few more unicorns? And see, that would change the game. And the same thing in Africa, if that happened, that would change the game, in my view.
No, 100%. What you said, I want people to really lean in on some things that are super important. Now, I'll take a page out of the Japanese car automakers book, right? I remember in the 60s and 70s when the Japanese, started to come into the U.S. market with their brand of cars, and when they brought them out, they were cheap, they were very inexpensive, they didn't last. The perception out there definitely was like, oh, you buy a Japanese car, you just bought a really low end vehicle, and in the United States they were riding around in these giant, boats basically on wheels.
Land yachts.
Land yachts. Yeah, it was a land. It's exactly what it was. And nobody wanted to, at that time, being in a small little car that, really, it didn't stand up to the American auto makers at all. What did they do? They went back and took a look at what they were doing. They took a page really out of the American book and got into Lean Six Sigma and said, you know what? We are going to make an ideal sedan vehicle that is going to out innovate our American counterparts. So we're going to come back. We're not going to compete. We're not going to make a new land yacht. No, we're going to just make a better four-door sedan than anyone else. And oh, by the way, while they were doing that, this little thing came across called the oil embargo, that the price of gas just skyrocketed. So it became very, very difficult to drive around in this land yacht, at the gas prices that they were. And there's little bitty cars, a couple of them that came out called the Accord, called the Camry. And then people say, well, I like the price point. I'm going to go ahead and try, this low-end car, as we thought it was, and drive around with it, and became the best-selling sedan, not only in the United States, but in the world. So there you have where perception, was reality. I said at one point in time, it was a cheap, inexpensive car, no doubt. And it wasn't the most popular brand out there. But when they came back and there was a necessity, a need for an alternative to the land yacht, so to speak, right? Now, it was this four-door sedan that would go 100,000 miles, wouldn't break apart, was very rock solid. Everybody knew you bought Honda Accord, you're going to go well over 100,000 miles, and it's not going to have a lot of maintenance, along the way. And oh, by the way, the Americans, when they started to say, hey, we got to shift and move, they really were the ones with a lower quality vehicle for the price point. So perception, reality to perception to reality can change the game, to your point. It's just a matter of, are we willing to step back? And I mean, put it on my lens, if I were in an African country or looking at fintech and the developer of these types of technologies, we are developing this technology out of St. Croix, Virgin Islands. We're going to have this financial marketplace. We're going to take a look at, like, yes, we understand the perception. Let's step back. We're not going to reinvent the banking system. No, we're going to come out with something slicker, better, faster, ease of use that can be utilized by this type of population, not only in, let's just say, St. Croix, Virgin Islands, throughout the Caribbean archipelago, but then start looking at it from a worldwide lens, and then working with our partners who already have the infrastructure built out, like in these African nations. And then now we're at lightning speed. Remember, there's discovery, not even discovery, there's gold in Guyana that was never, that's part of CARICOM. You've got oil that's pumping out of Guyana. That's going to change the economic base in the Caribbean archipelago that hasn't had. But now we've got to build the vehicle for it to happen. And to your point, I'm a brand guy, but you sound like a brand guy here. You've got to change the influence and the perceptions that are out there, and really become game changing from that point. I'm gonna give you a couple minutes to chime in on that, and then we're gonna go to our last break.
Great, Grant, because all I want to do is just add on a few things, and you were right in saying that that was the perception of Japanese cars. To me, the oil embargo was one of the big changes. I mean, I remember at that time working at a gas station, and gas was 29 cents a gallon, and it shot up to over $1. People were crazy. Okay, you had long lines, right? They wanted to do every other day. You can go to all these kind of crazy things, and it was because most of the cars were getting 6 miles to the gallon, and the Japanese stepped in, and they came out with the newer, better model. One, because they had the flexibility, not only in how they manufactured, but in their thinking. Okay, what hurts the big American car companies is, well, we've always done it this way, and it'll come back. So their attempts at the small economy cars were really terrible. And I can think of things like the Vega was terrible, right? Yeah. Okay, so that happened. The other big change that happened in auto manufacturing came from the Japanese also, which was, when Henry Ford started the assembly line, that dramatically changed auto manufacturing. You could mass produce now, because before that, each car was built and worked until it was finished. And then you started on the next one, right? Now you have the assembly line. The Japanese came in with JIT, just-in-time manufacturing. And that really changed the thing. The other thing the Japanese did is they built car manufacturing plants in the U.S. and
Smart.
they did that before they were forced to anything else. They just saw right away that we can come in here, we can build better than the Americans, and we can sell cars cheaper because now we have no shipping costs and so on and so forth, right? So they saw those advantages and grabbed it. And by the way, they were able to go to the on the city level and at the state level and get deals to put in their factories. So they had tax abatement for years. So it was smart plan, and people, don't really think about that so much. And then what I said before about both the Caribbean or Africa, you need the unicorn. Well, they had their unicorn. You talked about it. Best-selling car in the world, right? That's a unicorn. So with those things, this is how they were able to take their brand from being ugly, because they were, to being low quality, they were, for being cheap, and turn it into now, some of the best luxury cars, competing with big names like Cadillac, Mercedes, and BMW are Japanese, right?
Japanese and Kia. Don't even think about Kia. South America. We've already had the same playbook. I remember when Kia first came out and people, cheap, Hyundai, forget about it. Now look at them, right?
Well, Korea has mirrored the Japanese playbook in so many things, and in a lot of cases done a little better.
So we're going to take that to break. We're going to come back. We're going to wrap this whole thing up because there is so much that we can do to make this innovation a reality and get over the perceptions of the past, for sure.
The difference between influence and legacy, it's the platform that carries your voice. You're not visible because you lack talent. You're visible because your brand doesn't speak. I've built 5-star BDM to change that. Most leaders have the expertise, but not the presence, the vision, but not the vehicle. Across 3 cities, one brand is helping leaders rise above the noise. Here in the heart of Omaha, strategy isn't left to chance. It's engineered with precision. In Omaha, we engineered your Zachner brand, AI-powered, data-driven, precise. TISA went from a local nonprofit to a national speaker in 90 days. We don't guess your brand strategy, we build it. On the shores of St. Croix, your brand takes on depth and meaning, shaped through curated retreats and legacy experiences. In St. Croix, strategy becomes soul. Our retreats don't just refine your message, they rediscover your mission. One founder rewrote his entire company story here. Funding followed 30 days later. This is where leaders remember who they were meant to be. In Vibrant Miami, momentum meets amplification, transforming your voice into a movement. In Miami, your brand becomes a movement. Business development accelerators, audience building. Joy came with an old website and an outdated company name, but she left with 5,000 followers and a waiting list. This is where you scale with soul. 3 cities, 1 mission. Your legacy ignited. It started with a thread. Let's pull it together. Stop blending and start leading. 5-star BDM, where legacy is engineered, embodied, and ignited. Visit 5starbdm.com and book your brand audit today.
All right, we are back. We're going to wrap this whole segment up. I think we have come holistic in our view of the current state. I wanted to make sure our audience understood that, first of all, Africa is not behind in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of countries that are there that have been utilizing mobile technology to fuel fintech applications at scale that are, I would say, state of the art on the world stage. And what they're suffering now from, if anything, would be sort of like we just put the analogy together with Japanese car makers or even Korean car makers, that when they first came out, the perception was reality. They had a lower end quality product that was competing against much better competitors. But over time, that changed. And I think that is what's happening now, where I remember even when in my world in competing in the telecommunications space, in which I worked for the AT&T of the world that owned we call the analog PBX market. Everybody had to use the technology. And then you had things that came in like deregulation. They said, hey, AT&T, you're a monopoly. They broke into different baby bells. All of a sudden, you didn't have to buy from them. You could buy from other people. There were other alternatives. And oh, by the way, that telephone system that you had to get from AT&T wasn't the real case. And then, oh, by the way, there was a new technology that came out called the internet. And they had this thing called voice over IP that you could do telecommunications. You didn't have to use that infrastructure. You could use a different infrastructure. You didn't have to use that, right? You didn't have to use what they call the PSTN with a public system. You could use IP, which is your internet. And now, today, voila, everybody uses IP. We're ripping out our analog phones. Me and Chris talked about this earlier. We have this thing called a dial-up, right? The rotary dial. Well, that's the way of the dodo. But if you had to maintain that system, and that's what AT&T did, they had to maintain it as they were trying to innovate. You had companies like Cisco, like, I don't have to do that. I've already got a data infrastructure in place. Oh, by the way, I'll just use the telecommunications as an app on my system, and I got the same kind of communication, and that is why Cisco Systems just ate the Avaya market, or call it Avaya because that became their PBX manufacturing arm. Overnight, it seemed like, and it just is like, wow. So things can happen if you don't innovate and you get complacent or what you're used to. Like, hey, I got a dominant place in the market, and you think that's going to last forever. Take a page out of what I just said. That was a 100-year-old company, just in AT&T Avaya, that over maybe, I'm going to say, a 10-year period of time, flipped the script. We don't hardly even know about them anymore when it comes to what you call telecommunications space, because it's changed so dramatically. So I'm going to give this over to Chris. With that said, what do you think the play is now for operations like in St. Croix, and then operations in Africa and the rest of the world?
Well, Grant, first, I think the example of Cisco and AT&T was really a good one because it mirrors what we're seeing in the financial community, right? So you have the big banks that are trying to do the new technology, but 80% of their budget is spent from the technology side on maintaining these old systems, which they have to have. They are the foundation of the bank, right? Mm-hmm. But then you have the new banks, or what we call the neobanks, coming out, and those banks, they don't have any of that legacy system to maintain. So they can come out right away with the newest technology, faster, more easy to use, better viewing for people, less clicks, all these kind of great things that people want today. And that same thing mirrors what's going on in Africa today also with the rise of fintech. You don't have the legacy systems that you have to maintain. They never had really big mainframe computers, right? Everything, just started off, and with the internet and the cloud, you don't need to even maintain very much hardware at all, right? So your cost of getting involved drops dramatically, and you're able to do a lot of things because, like Cisco, they not only didn't have the cost of the old infrastructure, but they didn't even have to think about it. Mm-hmm. They could spend all their time on money on what do we need to do today for tomorrow, and did it very well.
100%.
So when we come around to the Caribbean, right? We need to take that same kind of action. And what is, I think, the game changer today is St. Croix and what's there. So you have the gateway into the U.S. right there, right in the middle of all the island nations, right there. Same culture, same background, right? But it's U.S. territory, so the rules are a little more favorable for everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And St. Croix and the U.S. Virgin Islands are really looking to share that threat. So it's a matter of pulling the other islands together and saying, listen, you're not going to lose your nationality. You're not going to lose your culture. You're not going to lose your identity. What you're going to do is you're going to gain the leverage that we can have here into the U.S. and into the global market. So it's quite important to get everybody on that page, Grant.
100% on that. You've got a $30 trillion economy. Just north here, just on the other side of Puerto Rico, is right there. You need to get into the flow. That is it. How do we get into deal flow of that $30 trillion economy? If just $1 trillion came through and was funneled through the Virgin Islands, because what's going to attract that? The attraction of the Jones Act, right? The attraction of and infrastructure. People don't realize that when cable and wireless came to the Caribbean, they operated out of St. Croix. They built one of the largest networks in the world. It rivals Silicon Valley. We're not utilizing a backbone like this is incredible. A lot of people don't realize, and you've mentioned this a lot of times, that the banking system has better IT than some of the IT companies out there, right? And that's because it's built, the infrastructure is there. They can transact at lightning speed. That's one of the line of sight, for these digital transactions that are taking place in the stock markets are very key. So if you can start to emulate something like that out of St. Croix, start taking the infrastructure, what is already there, what's already in place, and run deal flow through it. We're talking game change. Even right now, the refinery is set to potentially come back online here probably in 2026. And it's starting to process oil from Guyana. The shipping industry, the logistics, you start to get into deal flow. That $30 trillion river of commerce now is attracted. Is that we already own that territory. Why are we not? That's crazy. Let's utilize our own asset. Let's make it happen, right?
No, I mean, Grant, you're exactly right. That when you start looking at things, and when you talk about cable and wireless and what they've done, which really was on the back of the old WorldCom, who actually built all this stuff there, and I know a lot of their executives ended up in jail for other reasons, but they actually built this, and it's considered either the third or fourth biggest and best communication center globally. I mean, you have to understand, everything going from the U.S. and Europe goes through there down to South America and through the Panama Canal all the way to the Orient, so it's a really strategic and critical spot. You have a deep water harbor there, which is where the refinery is. That is the best deep water harbor in the Caribbean, right? And you have the Jones Act, so it makes transshipments through there ideal. Now, somebody can easily say to me, well, how can we do transshipments through the Virgin Islands when there's no shipping line serving throughout the Caribbean?
Mm-hmm.
There's some missing puzzle pieces that we need to find and put in.
Yes.
I kind of look, when you have a landscape puzzle, right? The first thing you do is you do the border, right? That's the easiest thing because it's all straight edges, right? Then you can do the land and the city. The thing that takes you the longest and the hardest is the sky, right? Because they're all blue pieces, and this is where I feel we are with the Caribbean and with what St. Croix is doing. So if we can just get those more difficult pieces put in place, we can actually have something here that can be the engine of growth throughout the region and have impact globally, which today the region doesn't. It's overlooked, unfortunately.
Well, we're going to make that happen. That's the whole point. Is let's put these pieces in place. Let's get the right players to play the right game and realize that at the end of the day, this is a win-win-win for everybody. So let's make this happen. I want to thank you again and implore to the audience to tune in again next week, because you can't miss as Chris goes to Saudi Arabia. Ooh, gotta watch that.